So, in this video we're going to explain some different characteristics about your beans when buying them or when deciding to buy them, and how to determine what they will be like and how to brew them. So, the first thing to look at is the date of the roasting of those beans. We always recommend, especially for espresso, to buy beans that have been roasted within the past month. So really the ideal range is about a week or 5 days, up to maybe a month, and then after that the beans tend to lose their freshness pretty quickly. This also kind of reinforces the idea that you should buy whole beans and grind them freshly right before using them. Okay, especially in espresso, espresso really highlights any small details of your flavor of your coffee. So moving forward, with that said, so beans that are a week to a month old is usually the golden time range. Too fresh can also kind of be a bad thing. So there are other characteristics to consider. So the roast level, whether they're lightly roasted and slightly more bright color, light brown, or if they're dark roasted, a very dark, almost black colored coffee bean, the roast level really affects the brewing. So for example, a darker roast bean means that it's been roasted for a long time or cooked more. And what that relates to in the actual brewing process and the drink is that it's going to be more cooked, so it's going to have more holes in it, it's going to be more porous, less dense, and this means that it's going to extract that coffee flavor into the drink much easier. With that said, we would want to brew it for less time, a lower temperature. We may even adjust the grind size to make it a little bit more coarse, bigger pieces, so that the water can flow easier. And then the same goes for the opposite. So for a lighter roast, a very light colored bean, it tends to be more dense. And then the opposite for a light roast. So a light roast tends to be a more dense bean. It has less holes in it. With that said, you would want to make it a slightly finer grind typically to slow down that extraction, to make those particles smaller and fit together, allowing more pressure in the brewing process and give it more time to extract those maybe acidic or more sour flavors and those floral hints, the fruity hints. Okay? So we've discussed the age of the beans as well as the roast level. Some other factors that we won't go into too much detail about are things like the origin. So if you have a blend, then that means that these beans come from different places and they've mixed together different crops. Versus SOE or single origin espresso beans may be from a single place, maybe even a very specific farm. So with that said, Ethiopian beans tend to be a higher elevation with fruitier tones, meaning that they might need a slightly longer brewing because the acidic fruity flavors are going to be a bit strong, and you want to give them a little more time extracting to get those out, as well as just being a denser bean again also needs more time to extract that with that. Versus another common origin of beans may be Colombia, and with those they tend to be the opposite. They tend to be a more even blend, and with that said, you would want to often do a slightly shorter brew time, smaller ratio, so like a 1 to 1.5 ratio of coffee dose input versus the extracting liquid, and maybe a slightly lower temperature for a Colombian bean. And those are just guidelines, but there's also other information that may affect your opinions. For example, washed or natural processed. Natural processed beans tend to have a bit of a fermented, or some people may even think of it as like a funky, specific kinds of fruit flavor, versus a natural washed may have a more balanced flavor, a bit less sour, a bit less fruity, maybe more on the chocolatey side. So these things will also affect your brew things. But at the end of the day, it really all just comes down to personal preference. So we always recommend, experiment, change one variable a little bit at a time, and find, sample every shot you ever pull so that you know what you like. Thanks for watching.